The ocean has a simple rule. If you reach the top, nothing can touch you. No claws, no teeth, no rivals, just dominance. But that rule has a loophole, a crack in nature's design, a biological calculation error so brutal that it turned the greatest predator in history into a victim of something far more merciless than any enemy: physics. Because in the deep sea, power isn't the final boss. The final boss is math. Calories in, calories out, heat gained, heat lost. The ocean doesn't reward the strongest. It rewards the creatures that can afford to exist. And when a predator becomes too large, it doesn't just become a king, it becomes an anomaly, an engine that can't stop running, a monster that can't stop eating, a living machine that must constantly refuel or collapse under its own mass. That's the paradox of gigantism. At a certain size, being stronger doesn't make you safer. It makes you fragile. You don't die because something hunts you. You die because the world stops being able to feed you. And nature doesn't care how legendary you were. It only cares whether your body still balances the equation. Now imagine an ocean that was once overflowing with prey, warm currents and endless energy, an ancient buffet designed for giants. And imagine what happens when that buffet shrinks, when the water cools, when the currents shift, when the math no longer adds up. Because somewhere in Earth's past, evolution built something too big to exist, and the bill came due, and the ocean collected. And before I even tell you its name, you need to understand the terrifying truth. This wasn't extinction by battle. This was extinction by design flaw. And the bigger the predator got, the closer it moved toward the edge of its own survival. In the ancient seas, predators didn't just hunt. They ruled war zones. And at the top of that food chain was a shape in the water so massive it didn't need speed to be feared, and didn't need stealth to be deadly, because everything around it was already trapped in its shadow. This creature wasn't built like a shark the way you picture sharks today. This was a predator, designed like a moving industrial tool, a living set of jaws powered by muscle, momentum, and hunger. And that hunger wasn't a personality trait, it was a requirement. Because size isn't free, size is expensive. Size is a contract with biology, and once you sign it, you can't stop paying. Now let's talk about what evolution actually did here. Because when people imagine ancient monsters, they imagine them as overpowered cheat codes. But evolution doesn't create cheat codes. It creates prototypes. And sometimes those prototypes contain errors that only show up later, when the environment changes. This predator was the ultimate prototype, a heat-generating giant in a world that could support it, with a metabolism that demanded massive amounts of fuel and a body that demanded constant movement. Because in the ocean, a super predator doesn't get to rest the way land animals do. It doesn't get shelter. It doesn't get downtime. The ocean is movement, pressure, and endless distance. And when you're built for domination, every second you exist costs energy. And the bigger you are, the more the universe taxes you. Now picture the ancient ocean during the Miocene. Warmer seas, richer coastal shelves, and prey everywhere. Whales evolving, seals spreading, massive fish populations, and an entire marine world that basically looked like a buffet created by accident. It wasn't just abundance, it was opportunity. And in that opportunity, evolution kept scaling up the design, pushing the limit further and further, like an engineer adding more horsepower to an engine without checking the fuel tank size. Bigger jaws, stronger bite, heavier body, more power, more dominance, but also more hunger. And eventually the math became terrifying, because when you reach the size of a true marine giant predator, you're not just hunting to survive, you're hunting to keep a furnace burning. The ocean may look calm from above, but inside it is a constant energy war. And this predator was the most expensive machine the sea had ever produced. And yes, now we can say its name, Megalodon. Not a myth, not a dragon. A real animal that swam through real oceans with a body built like a biological mistake. A predator that didn't just eat prey, it erased it. Teeth like blades. A bite that wasn't just lethal, it was catastrophic, designed to crush bone, tear flesh, and end a chase instantly, because a predator that big couldn't afford long pursuits. Speed costs energy. Struggle costs energy. And Megalodon was engineered for efficiency and violence. One hit, one kill, one meal. Because if the kill took too long, the math would punish it. And here's the scary part. Megalodon didn't need rivals to be in danger. It only needed one thing to happen: a shift in the ocean's economy. Because the ocean is not stable. It is a system of currents, temperatures, and food chains that can change like a switch. And when it changes, giants don't adapt easily. Giants don't pivot. Giants don't hide. Giants don't eat whatever's available. Giants are specialists in being enormous, and that is exactly why they break. Think of Megalodon as a luxury predator, a king that required a kingdom-sized meal plan, because when you're that big, a small meal isn't just useless. It's insulting to your metabolism. A few fish won't do anything. A seal won't matter. Megalodon needed dense calories, fatty marine mammals, large prey, big energy returns, because its body wasn't built to snack. It was built to consume. And for millions of years, the ancient ocean provided that fuel. But then the planet began to change. Temperatures dropped, ice expanded, currents shifted, coastlines transformed, and the warm, shallow seas, the perfect feeding grounds for massive predators, began to shrink and fracture. And when habitats change, prey changes too. Whale species began migrating differently. Some populations declined, others moved into colder waters, and suddenly the ocean wasn't a buffet anymore. It was a maze. And here's where the real horror begins. Megalodon wasn't killed by a single enemy. It was killed by the slow collapse of its calorie supply. The mathematics of hunger stopped working, because as the ocean cooled, two things happened at once. Prey became harder to find, and energy costs rose. Colder water pulls heat out of the body like a thief. A giant predator needs to stay warm, stay moving, stay hunting. And if Megalodon was even partially warm-blooded, like many scientists suspect for large sharks and active swimmers, then its energy demands were even more extreme. It wasn't just a predator anymore. It was an engine burning fuel every second just to stay operational. And when the prey distribution breaks, you don't just get a little hungry. You hit starvation like a wall. You start spending more energy than you can recover. You start hunting longer, traveling farther, burning through your own reserves, and the ocean doesn't care that you're a legend. It only cares that you can't pay the cost of being you. And this is where the ocean turns from kingdom to trap. The same size that made Megalodon untouchable made it impossible to survive a shortage. Smaller predators can wait. Smaller predators can adapt. Smaller predators can switch food sources. But Megalodon couldn't downsize. It couldn't evolve a smaller stomach overnight. It couldn't magically find new prey in a colder world where the best calories were leaving. And that's the brutal truth. The Megalodon wasn't too weak. It was too expensive. And right here is where I want you to pause for 1 second. Because if you're fascinated by the way science uncovers monsters like this, how it turns ancient bones and teeth into living equations, then hit like and subscribe to become part of our laboratory of mysteries. Because what happens next is the part that feels like a disaster movie, written by biology itself. Because the collapse wasn't dramatic at first. It was subtle. A few missing meals, a few longer hunts, a few failed chases. And then suddenly, the predator that once ruled the war zone becomes trapped in a spiral. The ocean cools, prey shifts, and now every successful hunt is followed by an even bigger problem. The next hunt has to happen soon. Megalodon couldn't stockpile food. It couldn't store enough energy to survive long droughts. And remember, this animal isn't living in a forest full of options. It's in an ocean where prey can vanish into distance in a single migration, and when the prey moves, the predator has to follow. But travel isn't free. Every mile costs fuel. Every day costs fuel. Every breath, every movement, every moment alive costs fuel. And if Megalodon needed massive prey like medium to large whales to meet its daily energy demands, then missing that target wasn't just inconvenient, it was lethal on a timer. This is the mathematics of hunger. The bigger you are, the narrower your margin becomes. It's like building a skyscraper on a foundation that barely holds. Fine, until the weather changes. And the Miocene to Pliocene ocean changed, like weather turning into climate. Currents reorganized, food chains reorganized. And suddenly being a coastal ambush apex predator wasn't the best strategy anymore. The ocean became less predictable, colder, and more fragmented, and that meant prey became scattered and moving. And Megalodon, built like a battering ram, was now trying to survive in a world where the best prey was becoming harder to access. Meanwhile, something else was happening, something far more dangerous than temperature. Competition was evolving. Because when the ocean changes, smaller predators don't just survive, they multiply, they specialize, they become efficient. And one of those efficient predators would become the nightmare Megalodon didn't anticipate: early great white sharks and other fast, adaptable hunters that could target smaller prey, operate in cooler waters, and thrive with lower energy costs. Megalodon was built for crushing giants, but the ocean was beginning to reward speed, flexibility, and smaller prey strategies. And that shift is devastating, because once the ecosystem stops being built for you, your size becomes a disadvantage. You become slower to adapt, slower to reproduce, slower to recover from population hits. And population hits are exactly what happen when food becomes inconsistent. Your young don't survive, your adults weaken, your territory collapses, and what used to be an unstoppable predator becomes a declining species caught in a world that no longer matches its design. But if you think Megalodon was alone in this trap, you're missing the most chilling part. Because Megalodon wasn't the only giant predator built on the same evolutionary mistake. There was another monster in the same ocean, another apex force, another living weapon that evolution engineered to dominate the same war zone. And unlike Megalodon, this rival didn't have teeth like knives. It had a mouthful of bone-crushing spears, a whale that hunted whales, a predator with a skull designed for impact, a living torpedo with a brain. Its name was Livyatan, Livyatan melvillei. And if Megalodon was a biological chainsaw, Livyatan was a biological battering ram with strategy. It had massive teeth built to grab and tear, a head built for ramming, and a mind capable of planning hunts in a way sharks simply can't. The ocean during that time wasn't just home to one apex predator. It was a war zone with two kings fighting for the same throne. And here's the terrifying irony. They weren't just rivals. They were both products of the same engineering era, both oversized, both dependent on high-calorie prey, both designed for a world of abundance, both trapped by the same equation. Because giants compete in a narrow space, they need the same food, the same habitats, the same prey density. And when the environment starts collapsing, competition becomes lethal even without direct combat. Because if Livyatan takes the prey, Megalodon loses a meal. If Megalodon dominates a hunting ground, Livyatan has to travel farther, and travel costs energy. And energy is everything. So even if they weren't constantly fighting face to face, the ecosystem forced them into an arms race. Bigger jaws, bigger bites, bigger bodies, more demand, less margin. And when the ocean finally shifted hard enough, it didn't matter who was stronger. It mattered who could survive on less, and neither of them were built for less. That's why the collapse wasn't about one monster defeating the other. It was about nature deleting an entire blueprint. A blueprint that said, build the predator as large as possible, because at a certain point size stops being a weapon and becomes a liability. And if Livyatan had any advantage at all, it was intelligence and flexibility. But even that wasn't enough, because the same forces that starved Megalodon also rewired the world Livyatan depended on. The prey changed, the routes changed, the shallow warm seas shrank, the coastal nurseries became unstable, and as both predators declined, the ocean didn't replace them with something bigger. It replaced them with something smarter in evolutionary terms. Predators that were efficient, adaptable, survivable. Because the ocean punishes excess strength the same way gravity punishes excess weight. It demands payment, and it always collects. So when we ask what killed the Megalodon, we're not really asking who defeated it. We're asking what happens when evolution builds something so extreme that it only survives under perfect conditions. And the answer is simple and terrifying. The moment the environment stops being perfect, the design collapses. The ocean didn't need to fight Megalodon. It just needed to change the numbers, and the numbers did the killing. Megalodon became too big to exist, a biological mistake so powerful it couldn't survive reality. And Livyatan, built from a different blueprint, still fell into the same trap, proving that being the apex predator isn't about being the most brutal, it's about being the most sustainable. Because the sea doesn't reward legends, it rewards survivors. And now I want to leave you with one final thought. Right now the ocean still has giants, still has apex hunters, still has monsters that feel untouchable, but the same rule still applies. If the environment changes faster than a species can adapt, even the kings become ghosts. So tell me in the comments, if evolution made another error today, what animal do you think would be next? The next anomaly, the next biological mistake, the next legend that becomes too big to exist.